Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I am done with grades. I posted them. I'm done with my semester. I put my vacation email responder up. I'm ready.
Oh, you settled on the language.
Well, I just wrote something down. If people are weirded out by it, whatever. I'm off contract, period. Started working on some videos.
Uh-huh.
I have videos planned for this week. I have a couple live streams scheduled for this week. One on Thursday with other professors. Animal Crossing fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then one on Friday is the Quidditch weekend event.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's going to be on YouTube starting at 11 a.m.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Are you taking a vacation?
This is my vacation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. It's hot.
Uh-huh.
It's got to be 100 degrees in here.
It's going to be way hotter on, I don't know, later in the week.
So pretty soon I'm going to start sweating on these pretty noticeably, but that's just the way that goes.
Well, you can wake up really early with me and do podcast episodes.
Yeah, that sounds worse. But, all right. I have to sleep when it's cool out. There's no way I can wake up early. We moved the table.
Yeah, I reorganized this whole room.
Mm-hmm.
This is my room.
It's your room. I got the other desk. I'm out of here.
Or Jeffrey got kicked
No more
out.
converting one person's setup to another.
Yeah.
Anything else going on?
I don't think so.
It's supposed to be 109 on Saturday or Thursday or something, so look forward to that. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Juan's ready. Turn to page 327, Dobbys Reward. Today's lesson is called Speak Your Fear.
He has the little diary.
Yes, he does. Synopsis. The chapter begins with Harry, Ron, Ginny, and Lockhart exiting the Chamber of Secrets and proceeding to Dumbledore's office. They find a distraught Mr. and Mrs. Weasley there, along with Professor McGee and Professor Dumbledore. Harry recounts what happened in the chamber, culminating with Dumbledore revealing his expectations that Voldemort was involved. Dumbledore shares that Lord Voldemort was once a student named Tom Riddle, and that the diary must have bewitched Ginny. Harry and Dumbledore continue the conversation in private, and after Dumbledore shares that Voldemort must have imprinted on Harry, Harry admits that the Sorting Hat told him he would do well in Slytherin. Dumbledore highlights that it was precisely Harry's insistence on not being put in Slytherin that illustrated the difference between he and Voldemort, and shows Harry that he pulled the Sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat. Finally, Lucius Malfoy shows up, Dobby in tow, astonished that Dumbledore has returned after having been removed by the governors. Dumbledore exposes Lucius's lies, and Dobby gestures to Harry that the diary belonged to Malfoy. Harry feigns giving Malfoy the diary back and puts his sock into it, which Lucius discards into Dobby's hands, accidentally freeing him from his slavery. The story ends with Harry and the Weasleys reunited with Hermione, enjoying the end of a wild and scary year at Hogwarts.
We didn't watch the end of the movie. I forgot to watch the end of the movie before this episode. It's okay. We'll watch the full movie.
It's like magic.
Before the book one. But, okay, first of all, I find it very impressive that the teachers let Harry talk and explain the story to them for 15 minutes straight. I can't imagine that happening at all.
Or Mr. and Mrs. Weasley.
Without any interruption. But Harry just, tells, all the missed opportunities he had to tell Dumbledore anything. It's here it is, all, however, 17 chapters worth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also found it very interesting that Dumbledore said very few people know that Lord Voldemort was once called Tom Riddle, and how that's it's so sneaky. But then I was thinking about the timeline of it all. The diary was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I guess reasonably, even if there was a lot of people, people who went to school with him were like, oh man, Tom Riddle's Lord Voldemort now or whatever, then, fading away
You're talking about the class reunion?
Yeah. So what'd you do with your life?
Moldy Voldy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I just found that, interesting as well of like this is part of the secrecy of it, and maybe also why Harry himself, I've already ranted about Harry not like studying up on Voldemort or knowing anything about the history of anything, but even more so of people not recognizing or making that connection of it's like two completely different people, which is I guess kind of the point of like the distinction of who Tom Riddle is and who Lord Voldemort is, even though they're obviously the same person. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's an externalization of the fact that people don't like to consider where evil was before it was evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like
boy, he was like,
and even if we want to
student.
talk about like Tom Riddle already having been evil at that point in his life, there still is like the boogeyman culture, right? Where it's just like, oh, you know, he's a manifestation of everybody's fear, so it's not really it doesn't even matter where he came from to them. And I think that it's particularly telling that Dumbledore seems to be the only person who cares where he came from. And obviously we'll find out that Dumbledore has different touchstones with Tom Riddle, but we already found one in this book, right, with the flashback. Yep. I mean, the name is always an interesting one to me. I think it's for example, the fact that he still has his services to the school award still displayed, right? And like no one would even think twice because they don't even know that it's him.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if that was documented, as if people were actually keeping track and being like, I don't know, I know that it's messy and complicated, and that's why like the 50-year span kind of makes me pause and be like, all right, calm down. Like, that's a lot of time for something to develop, or of different people to have like an awareness of this dude, Tom Riddle, and his association with Lord Voldemort. But if we documented this in history, then we would know Tom Riddle equals Lord Voldemort. Ron would have seen it when he is like cleaning and be like, hey, Lord Voldemort. Or when the diary introduces himself to Harry, he'd be like, oh,
special
my
award
God.
for services to the school presented to Lord Voldemort.
Lord Voldemort. Yes, let's change the name on the plaque.
Names are a funny thing. I mean, I think it's tied into the theme that I was thinking about of speaking your fear. Like it cuts across the whole story, the fact that like people won't use his name. And so like it's just again embodying this sense of like, oh, if you're afraid, like hide from it, as opposed to like speaking it out loud, because you might find that it's not as scary as you thought it was. Yeah.
And the memory/not memory, Tom Riddle was basically bragging to Harry about like, oh, one day people will fear to speak my name or whatever. Like, it's just, it's really interesting. Also, I noted that as much as I have in the past talked about how much Dumbledore frustrates me, I do even though it is kind of annoying, I do appreciate that he's making Harry like sit through and reflect and like process what he's been thinking internally in his head and saying it out loud. So it could have been just as easy for Dumbledore to be like, or when Harry's like, oh, Voldemort says I'm like him, or whatever, or Tom, however he refers to him, but I'm like him. And it would have been easy for Dumbledore to be like, no, you're not, and just like say that point blank. But he was like, what do you think? And so like it finally forces Harry to speak his fear and say like, the Sorting Hat thought that I would do well in Slytherin. And like he has to confront that and do this, of course, in private with Dumbledore, but Dumbledore is basically pushing him to confront that and to kind of speak it out loud so that he can process it somehow. Because I feel like with Harry, it's probably easy to just be stuck in your head and like isolate yourself. I mean, so I did appreciate that from Dumbledore in this chapter, even though the first times that I read it, I was like, Dumbledore, just come on, you're dragging it out. But I feel like I appreciate it more now.
Yeah, I mean, people have to come to their own conclusions if they're ever going to change, right? It doesn't help that Dumbledore recognizes that Harry is different in the ways that he is, unless Harry recognizes it himself. I mean, I think Dumbledore he's just so enigmatic. I mean, he is clearly the archetypal, like, wise master in the sense that he doesn't seem to make many mistakes. I mean, we'll find out that he has made a few. And some he holds on to, and he'll make some more. But for the most part, he has this like 3D chess thing going on where he's like playing this game that no one else is paying any attention to, with like hiding the sword in the hat and having Fox stay and all this sort of stuff. And yeah,
it makes me wonder. I have wondered this, and I don't know if I ever came to any sort of like resolution in my own thinking about. Obviously Dumbledore knew Tom Riddle and like was a teacher and all that. And he also he knows Harry Potter now, and it's of course like from this conversation, Dumbledore clearly believes that Harry and Voldemort are two very different people, because he has the famous quote where he's talking about your choices. But it also makes me wonder about Dumbledore's interactions with Harry, like how much of it is shaped by his previous interactions with Tom Riddle, and like the kind of like, oh, if I had done this or that or whatever. I mean, clearly it's more complicated than, it's not Dumbledore's fault that Tom Riddle turned into Lord Voldemort, but it does make me wonder about Dumbledore's relationship with Harry and how that might reflect his past experiences with Tom Riddle or any other people from his past, you know?
Well, yes, and just to stay on Dumbledore for a little bit longer, like I've always, the only sort of real criticism that I've held for a long time about Dumbledore is sort of this idea that he doesn't seem to be present in the students' lives, like in general, right? But I think that there is a more charitable interpretation of what he's doing, which is that he is outward facing from Hogwarts. So he is trying to protect the school from outside forces and allow the students and teachers to do what they need to do. And in real life, we've had this experience, like that is an incredibly valuable thing to have in a school leader. And not many of them do it. Most of them are inward looking and would be hypercritical, like Umbridge will be. When she's whatever she is in book 5, where it's like, well, I'm going to react to outward pressures and like bring them on top of my students and stuff like that. But he's more so like he's willing to fall kind of on the sword and be like, oh, well, yep, you know. So I think that's interesting. I mean, it's a great chapter. It surprised me. The thing that surprises me the most reading it at this sort of interval pace, because usually I just mow these books down, is just how long Dobby is absent. Yeah. Dobby
just pops it. So basically, Dobby's at the beginning, and then
how many times do we see him?
I think just twice.
In the
before.
bedroom.
Oh no, sorry, 3 times, right?
Bedroom. And then hospital wing.
Oh wait.
Is that it?
Yeah, because we don't see him. That's when we learn about the platform closing. We don't see him at the platform. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, Dobby. Oh my goodness, Dobby. What was something that I wrote down about? It was the quote that I wrote down towards the end where, okay. I don't know if I have to back up just a little bit. So Dumbledore, Lucius, and Harry, which everyone by now knows how I feel about Lucius. So he walks in, and Dumbledore is coming in strong with some, it's subtle, not so subtle shade, and then the gesturing from,
the veiled threats.
Yeah.
He's given Lucius a taste of his own medicine.
And Dobby in the background being like, and Harry clicking, and then Harry comes through, and I wrote to myself, oh, no wonder in the movie Lucius comes in with the Avada being provoked by a 12-year-old. Oh my gosh. But then when Harry does the freeing of Dobby with the sock on the book and throws it at Lucius, who tosses it aside. So Dobby is, of course, very thankful, and then Harry was like, just promise never try to save my life again. And I was just like, dagger to the heart, literally. Oh my God. And so I have all these crying face emojis in my notes.
I see them.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Yeah,
little
Dobby is such an
Dobby.
interesting character, and the books flesh him out a lot more than the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I don't even think in the movies we see him in book 4 or in movie 4, but we'll see him in book 4. I don't know if he's in Prisoner of Azkaban at all, but yeah,
Yeah.
maybe he is actually. But I think it'll be fun to watch him grow and kind of relive why he becomes such a fan favorite. Because at this point, like, it's not like, okay, we're supposed to, I believe, pity the fact that like he abuses himself and
he's a slave.
is a slave,
Yeah.
which is perfectly reasonable. But outside of that, we haven't necessarily gotten to see him very much.
Yeah.
So like the connection is strong, but infrequent, and I think it'll be fun to sort of see where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I think the other, like, speaking your fear is Ginny, right? I mean,
poor Ginny. I feel
yeah,
so bad
it's
for
terrible.
her.
It really is, right? Because like what exactly her fears are, I think it's coming off weak to her brothers, right? That's why she never quite gets to the point of telling them what is actually bothering her. You know, like I'm certain that she felt some kind of internal struggle, and I think her character development bears this out of wanting to be independent and saying like, whatever's happening to me, like I can overcome it. Unfortunately, it was that sort of self-reliance was being preyed upon, right? Because she was like pouring more and more into the diary as opposed to outward. So I think it's a she fed the fear, right? Or like they were kind of eating each other of like, well, these weird things are happening and I don't want to tell anybody, so I'm going to tell this other thing.
Yeah.
And weird things will keep happening.
Yeah. I mean, Ginny, well, first of all, she's just a little first year.
I know.
This has happened in her first year in Hogwarts. I don't know if
it's arguably more crazy than Harry's first year.
Yeah.
Yes.
She got possessed.
Yeah.
and killed some chickens. And
Yeah.
it was wild. By the Dark Lord. By a memory
Winston.
Weird. Yeah, by Winston. Yeah, so I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the reason that the Weasleys have 7 kids is because Molly and Arthur wanted to have a daughter.
Right.
And so obviously their first 6 kids were boys, and so I think that
because Ron has some baggage there probably as well.
yeah,
right? Yeah.
little Ron. But yeah, so I mean, Ginny's the youngest, she's the only girl, and I'm sure, so now I'm reflecting on like at the very, very end, Harry's like, Ginny, what was it that you saw Percy doing? And she was like, oh, he was kissing Penelope, like he has a girlfriend. And I'm sure that she like held that secret because, you know, she's sensitive also, and like her thing with Harry Potter as well, you know, like there's a lot going on there. So I'm excited that Ginny is now a new character
for sure.
in the series.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Ginny. So I looked up some stuff about the Sword of Gryffindor, even though I knew a little bit about it. So the sword is inset with rubies, and rubies is apparently the gem that is, so the Hogwarts house, the little thing that keeps track of the house points, it's filled with gems, different colored gems for each house. And so rubies go for Gryffindor. It's the red that keeps track of the progress for the points for each house or for Gryffindor house.
Right.
The sword was made for Godric Gryffindor, which I have our chocolate frog card. So it was made by Ragnak the First, who was finest of the goblin silversmiths. And when it was finished, Ragnak coveted it so much that he pretended that Gryffindor stole it. And he sent minions to try to steal it back. And so there is this rumor about, so like there like
it plays out later.
This is actually this is actually a rumor in the wizarding world, like about Godric Gryffindor.
Because I think Griphook will claim that is true in book 7.
So that'll come back later. So this, what I'm talking about, is from Wizarding World Pottermore, so written by J.K. Rowling. So it is canon OG stuff. And so Gryffindor defeated him with his wand, did not kill the attackers, but sent them back and was like, if you ever come for me again, I'll I'll destroy you. He'll use the sword to destroy them. And so they were like, all right, cool, we're chill, I guess. And then yeah, so J.K. Rowling wrote like why would you need a sword? Like, you have magic, you have wands. So apparently before the Statute of Secrecy was made, wizards mingled freely with muggles and would use swords to defend themselves rather than or to defend themselves just as often as they would use wands. So that's, I guess, a reason. And of course the founders are super old, so like I guess it makes sense if you use wands and swords.
Yeah, it's a very Merlin-esque part of the lore, right? We typically see him like alongside of King Arthur in that, and he tends to also be a combatant at times. It depends. I mean, there's a lot of interpretations, but yeah.
She wrote, indeed, it was considered unsporting to use a wand against a muggle sword.
Sure, yeah.
But that didn't stop people from doing so.
Sure, of course, yes, of course.
Oh, and so on his card, it says that, of course, he's one of the 4 famous founders. He was the most accomplished dueler of his time, an enlightened fighter against muggle discrimination, and the first owner of the Sorting Hat, which is also nice that it goes hand in hand. I
looked up a little bit of the Sorting Hat.
Oh, nice.
So I think we've talked a bit about it before. So just a couple of small things. First was that it wasn't an object in the early drafts of Harry Potter. There's an interview with J.K. Rowling where she talks about like
how they were
dealing with sorting, and she couldn't really come up with anything. And at least in the story that she tells, it was brief. She was like, so I was just like, I'll just start listing ways that people can be like chosen. She's like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually she's like pulling names from a hat, pulling names from a talking hat, putting on a talking hat. And that was like what she said.
Awesome.
And the other thing was that I committed to memory that I thought was interesting is that there's a concept called the hat stall. Did we talk about this?
Yes, we did talk about the hat stall because McGonagall is a hat stall.
Yeah, so was Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't remember. Did we talk about it on the podcast?
Because Hermione, it took a very long time for the hat to think about Hermione.
Oh, I didn't remember if we talked about it.
Yeah.
Book 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's been some time. That's going to happen more and more frequently.
Yeah.
But I'm sure,
we talk about Harry Potter all the time. So we'll be like, did we say that here or did we say that
anyway.
somewhere else?
But yeah, so I think McGonagall was Ravenclaw Gryffindor and Pettigrew was Slytherin Gryffindor.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Hat stalls.
I think also mentioned was Lockhart, but he didn't quite make the classification of a hat stall, which apparently needs to be at least 5 minutes.
Yes.
But it took a decent amount of time between Slytherin and wherever he wound up, Ravenclaw. Yeah.
Freaking Lockhart. So J.K. Rowling also talked about, so like, of course, there's parallels and stuff. So Excalibur, for the Sword of Gryffindor, like where ideas come from. But something that stood out to me, I'm going to skip the stuff that we'll see later on with the Sword of Gryffindor. But she wrote in this excerpt that she's most interested in what happens when cultural beliefs collide. So in the Harry Potter books, the most militant of the goblin race consider all goblin-made objects to be theirs by right, although a specific object might be made over to a wizard for his lifespan upon a payment of gold. Witches and wizards...
It's a rental.
Yes. Witches and wizards, like muggles, believe that once payment has been made, the object belongs to them and their descendants or legalties in perpetuity. This is a clash of values without a solution because each side has a different concept of what is right. And I just find that so fascinating that it's great because it comes up again.
It does, right? That's basically what Grip Book references. Yeah. Like that it's like offensive to them that wizards pass down things that they have bought from goblins or just in general. It's quite interesting. I mean, it's definitely a different approach to what property means, like belonging to the maker versus the purchaser. I think we see those types of debates at times with like entertainment, music, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a conflict there of like what exactly purchasing something means. Yeah.
So I also have a card on Salazar Slytherin.
Okay.
Because he is, that is the actual, the book. And it's a bookmark, actually. Funny
That's
enough.
neat.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it. Where did you get that?
It was, it was courtesy of WV.
Not sponsored
Shout
right now.
out to WV.
Mm-hmm.
For the Harry Potter launch that we had a different,
cool.
a little gift bag. With other, spoiler alert, we all know that this is a Horcrux. So it was this along with the other Horcruxes that are on the show. Yeah, surprise.
What's a porky?
What's a porky?
All
So
right.
we have Salazar Slytherin, also a famous founder.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the first recorded parcel mouths, an accomplished legilimens, and a notorious champion of pureblood supremacy, obviously. His last remaining heir was Lord Voldemort.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's what Dumbledore said.
that's
He
what
said that.
Dumbledore said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which gives us even more insight to how much Dumbledore has researched this man.
Yes.
Mhm, yeah. Before I forget, another thing, there was a claim on Pottermore, wherever I found it, one of the wikis, that the Sorting Hat uses legitimacy,
Yes, I did see that as well.
which I thought was kind of interesting.
There is an entry by J.K. Rowling about Sorting Hats, but I don't remember if there's. I could have looked it up. We can look it up in the next book, I guess, if we haven't already talked about it. Okay, so the other thing though is that there seems to be clear evidence that the chamber was opened more than once between the death of Salazar and the entrance of Tom Riddle. This is according to Wizarding World Writing. It's called the entry is called Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. So in there, that's what it says, that the chamber has been opened before Tom Riddle. So that brings me back to the quote by Dumbledore where he's like, "It's our choices." So I don't know the situation or the circumstances. They're not detailed in here about like who opened the chamber before or like what those circumstances were, but this is also the writing where we have, sometimes people refer to it as Poopgate. So, where witches and wizards used to relieve themselves and just magic it away before plumbing. So plumbing at some point was installed in Hogwarts. And so that's how it ended up that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets became in the girls' bathroom. So,
But this was after, so whoever did it must have known because they put this iconography.
Yeah.
They put icons.
They put
iconography.
They put snakes.
Something. Yes.
They put snakes on a faucet. So it made me think about like, okay, well, let's say people knew about it or where it was or even opened it before, then according to Binns, this like legend carries on of like there's this monster to unleash, then that means whoever opened it before chose not to. So that's one interpretation. They chose not to unleash or search to unleash this thing, this monster. The other interpretation, which I think Tom Riddle / Lord Voldemort believes, is that, no one was as strong or powerful as me to be able to do it.
Up or something. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was thinking of when I was like, wait a second. She said that the chamber was open before. So I don't know. Yeah. Another interesting thought.
Well, I know we're planning to do a end of book video where we maybe talk about the book at large. Mm-hmm. Do you have any closing thoughts about the chapter?
I think that it's quite a satisfying ending because Lucius gets sacked. Lockhart can't remember anything. He gets fired.
Can we talk about how Dumbledore knows that Lockhart was using this magic? Because he says I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, basically hoisted by your own petard, or like you fall into your own trick type thing.
I didn't pick up. I remember reading that line, but I did not pick up on that. Wow. Yeah.
I thought if I'm not mistaken, in the moment, because there's two references, I think, to Dumbledore's mustache twitching, like he's laughing, and I think that's one of them, which I thought was kind of dark.
Oh, that's him laughing?
But yeah, like he's like stifling a laugh, kind of, or smiling.
I read that and I was like, I wonder, like,
it's so bushy,
he twitching,
right? So it's like
or like what is?
is
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. There are no
Which
exams.
I thought would be out of character for him, but
Right.
that's just me. I wasn't the person who wrote it, so apparently it is by
Oh
nature
my
in
God.
his character. But yeah.
Hagrid is back. Hermione's recovered. And then,
Oh, Hagrid.
yeah.
Go to Azkaban. It's
Poor
messed up.
Hagrid. Yeah, it is. And then Harry's like, hey, guys, this is a telephone number. And it's just so sweet.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, aw. So I like the
I
ending.
taught your dad how to use one.
I felt like it was more satisfying than book one, which seemed to wrap up very quickly. I mean, this still wraps up very quickly, but at least it feels like there's some sort of justice. Like, hey,
Yeah.
all this stuff is happening. Things seem to be going back rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
like, all right, bye, Harry.
You know what is the most astonishing thing of all the chapter?
Huh.
Is that after this happens, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley let Ginny stay at school for the rest of the thing. I can't imagine too many situations in
Well,
real
Harry
life where
and Ron saved them,
a
so.
parent of their generation wouldn't be like, well, you're out of here. Like, you're at least coming home until next year, that type of thing. But
Yeah.
she's like, oh, okay, well, all right, bye. Glad you're okay.
Glad you're okay.
But
Yeah.
it might be a reflection on the fact that, like, bad things happen with magic all of the time. So this is a pretty extreme one, but, like,
They went through the second
Seamus
Wizarding
blows
War.
himself up, like, 15 times. Like, it's, you know,
Or the first Wizarding War.
they did. They sure did.
I was
They
like,
were
wait,
young,
the second
yeah.
Wizarding War hasn't happened yet. But
Mhm,
yes,
mhm,
they
mhm.
went through war.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited for the summary book
Yeah, me too.
evaluation.
Probably next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Until then,
Wand's
Wand's ready.
ready.